A 19-year-old college student got off of work, headed home to grab her suitcase, and was supposed to catch a flight to go see her family, but she never made it to the airport because somebody was already inside her apartment waiting for her. This was no stranger. This was someone who had been watching her, messaging her, obsessing over her, and refusing to take no for an answer. Within hours, her family knew that something was wrong, and when they stepped inside her apartment, every instinct was screaming that something terrible had happened there. But the police response was that it wasn't urgent. She wasn't treated like she was in danger, and those first critical hours started slipping away. This is the story of Miya Marcano and how a young woman who had tried to protect herself and said no still ended up face to face with someone who had already decided that he wasn't taking no for an answer. As we walk through this case, you're going to see exactly what happened inside that apartment and the moments where everything could have gone differently, but they didn't. Welcome to the True Crime Nurse, everybody. My name is Kat, and I'm a registered nurse who loves all things nursing and true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell before you go. All right, friends, let's get started on today's case. Miya Iman Meiling Marcano was born on April 26, 2002, in Pembroke Pines, Florida, to her father Marlon and her mother Ima. She grew up in the beautiful South Florida with deep Caribbean roots and a rich cultural identity that she was very proud of. Her dad was a Miami-based entertainer from Trinidad who performed as a DJ under the name Eternal Vibes. He is well known in South Florida's Caribbean community because of his music. Her mom is from the Virgin Islands, with roots on both the U.S. side of St. Thomas and the British Virgin Islands. Mia's parents did end up separating, and later on her dad fell for a woman named Giselle, who became Mia's stepmom. Miya grew up immersed in the Caribbean culture, and she participated in the Miami Broward Carnival every year. She was even a part of her stepmom's performance group. She danced, and she was naturally talented at it. She went to Charles W. Flanagan High School in Pembroke Pines, Florida, and her teachers described her as an exceptional student. Her 11th and 12th grade English teacher, Christy Modia, wrote a poem about Miya that said, quote, "You were always wise beyond your years. Your future was your focus. You didn't entertain the foolishness, nor were you seeking the fool's gold. You knew how to set your goals on the true treasure. You understood delayed gratification. You were the model student," end quote. That is not the kind of language that a teacher uses to describe a student who just showed up and occasionally did their homework. Her teachers genuinely understood and valued her. After high school, Miya enrolled at the University of Central Florida in Orlando. Then she transferred to Valencia College, also in Orlando, where she was a second-year student. She was working on her associate's degree, and her family said that she was actually initially drawn to nursing. She always said that she felt a calling towards helping people in the most vulnerable moments of their lives. I'm sure that she would have made an incredible nurse. She ended up shifting her focus to sports medicine, which is still a healthcare field centered around taking care of others. Miya was also known to be the life of the party, and everybody enjoyed being around her. Some of my favorite facts about her personality that I learned were that her favorite color was royal blue, and her nickname was Princess. She also carried a small teddy bear with her everywhere that she went, which I thought was so sweet. Miya had so much life ahead of her, and she was destined for greatness in her life. Now I want to introduce you to a man that is highly relevant in today's case. Armando Caballero was born on February 14, 1994. He was 27 years old when today's story took place. He worked in maintenance at the Arden Villas luxury apartments, and Miya, who was only 19 at the time, was living and working there too. He already had some run-ins with the law, including trouble with women in previous apartments, but this didn't stop him from getting another job with access to more young women. The Arden Villas luxury apartments are only a mile from the University of Central Florida campus. The complex is managed by the Price Company, and they operate student-adjacent housing complexes all across the country. They specifically market their properties to college students and their families with the promise of safety and security while in college. The Arden Villas complex used a digital key fob system all throughout their buildings to make sure everybody stayed safe. Every apartment had a fob assigned to its resident. Every time a fob was used to lock or unlock a door, the access was logged electronically, including the fob number, the door, and the timestamp. Do we think that it's appropriate for a man with a criminal history to be working somewhere like that? Remember this because I promise you it's going to come up again later. Armando began working at Arden Villas in June of 2021. Almost immediately after starting this new job, Miya Marcano caught his eye. She was beautiful, smart, and talented, but that interest from the very beginning was not mutual. Miya worked in the leasing office and she interacted with residents every day, handled paperwork, and answered lots of questions for people. Since Armando worked in maintenance, that required him to move throughout the property daily and coordinate different tasks through the leasing office. Armando found a way to track down Mia's phone number through work, and his messages became relentless. Multiple people who had seen those messages said that they were deeply alarming and obsessive. He professed his love to her, promised to support her financially, and he even offered up his life savings to her. There were also cash app payments of hundreds of dollars sent to her that were unsolicited, by the way, and Miya would return them, but then he would just resend them. The fact that he kept resending that money after she repeatedly returned it is alarming. That is the behavior of someone who had decided that her refusal was not going to be accepted. Miya was clear with him, though. She told him that they were just friends and coworkers and nothing more. She was not interested in him. She didn't lead him on or ignore him. She was simply direct. Miya set her boundaries and he crossed it again and again and again. He did this over texts, in person, in food that he would bring her to work, and in money that she wasn't asking for or wanted. She told her parents about this maintenance worker at her building that had been making her feel very uncomfortable. They knew about the text messages, the money, and that Miya also reported her discomfort to management at Arden Villa's apartments. Even though this harassment was reported, Armando was never disciplined or reassigned. He just kept working. And in response, Mia's dad installed extra locks on her windows just to make sure she would be safe there. September 4th, 2021 was a Friday. Miya Marcano was working her usual shift in the Arden Villas leasing office, and she already had her bags packed in her apartment because she had to head to the airport after work. The plan was to wrap up her work shift, go home, grab her bag, go to the airport, and then be home in Fort Lauderdale that night for the carnival weekend with her family. At some point that morning, a coworker gave out yellow roses to all of the women in the leasing office. Miya thought that it was beautiful, and she carried it with her all throughout her shift that day. That rose would be the last detail that anyone remembered about Miya Marcano being alive. Miya spoke on the phone with her dad that afternoon, and she confirmed that she would be headed home that evening. She also texted her roommate that she'd be leaving for the airport shortly after leaving work. Miya always kept her parents and her roommate updated when it came to traveling, so when she didn't tell either of them that she had arrived to the airport or that she was taking off, this was very out of character. She also stopped replying to texts, which is also strange, but her mom tried to remain hopeful that she was maybe just busy after work and she would arrive soon safely. The flight landed, and when Miya didn't walk out with the other passengers, her family immediately knew that something bad had happened. They waited hours there for her, and she was nowhere to be found. At 9:23 that night, Mia's mom called the Orange County Sheriff's Office to request a welfare check. She let them know that her daughter was supposed to be on a flight to Fort Lauderdale that evening, that the plane had landed in Fort Lauderdale, but Miya was not on it. She wasn't answering the phone, and they needed the police to go check on her before they could get there in case she needed their help. The first responding officer arrived at Arden Villas and knocked on Mia's apartment door 3 times, but there was no answer. Then he walked around the outside of the building and attempted to get a look into her bedroom through the window. He wrote in his report that he looked inside but didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. He added that the window appeared to be unlocked, but remember, Mia's dad had recently installed additional locks on the window specifically to prevent anyone from breaking in. He was trying to keep his baby girl safe. Even though the window should not have been able to open, it was opened. Based on what he could see, the officer felt that he found nothing suspicious. He did not treat the apartment as a crime scene, didn't take any pictures, and he didn't call for backup or to a supervisor. He did wait for Mia's roommate to arrive, though, so that he could get into the apartment and look around. When the roommate let him into the apartment, that's when everything changed, at least for Mia's family. A small bookcase was found propped against the door handle from the inside of Mia's bedroom. It was set up in a way so that nobody could come into her room from the hallway. After the officer finally got into her bedroom, He noticed that her bedroom window was open and that the locks were visibly broken, which he hadn't been able to see from the outside earlier. Her bed was also unmade and completely disturbed. Jewelry was scattered all over the floor as if a struggle had taken place there, and her teddy bear, the one that she never went anywhere without, was stuffed inside her closet and not with her. Her luggage was also still sitting there, next to her desk, and the rose that she had been carrying with her all day was sitting in the trash can. The deputy saw all of this, and he still did not escalate the case. He did not report Mia as a missing endangered person. He classified her as a voluntary missing person. That's only appropriate when an adult has left on their own accord, not when there are signs of foul play. He told Mia's family, if you haven't heard from her by Tuesday, call us back and we'll come look at the cameras and then read the key fob log. Tuesday. Mia had already been missing for hours and her apartment made it clear that there was a struggle there, and the deputy told her family to wait until Tuesday. If she left willingly, why not simply walk out her front door? Why break the locks on her windows? And why didn't she bring her bear? A security guard at Arden Villas lifted fingerprints from Mia's bedroom window and attempted to hand them to the responding deputy as evidence. According to the family's attorney, the deputy declined to take those prints as he was laughing at the security guard and then told the security guard, keep them in case we need them later. The guard was then told by the deputy that this wasn't a high priority case. I'm sure that you're already shaking your head like I was, but Mia's dad, Marlon, drove as quickly as he could to Mia's apartment. He called the Orange County Sheriff's Office at approximately 3:52 a.m. on September 25th and asked them to return to the apartment because of what he saw. They were not willing to wait until Tuesday to call the police again. Mia's family did what investigators had not done thoroughly enough, and they looked around and noticed that quite a few things were off. They found a box cutter in Mia's room, which had no clear, innocent explanation as to why it was in there, and they showed it to the deputy. Around this time, something happened that would become one of the most chilling moments in this entire case. Mia's family was at the complex and talking to the deputies when they noticed a silver Ford Fusion in the parking lot. That car belonged to Armando. He was there. He had come to the complex in the middle of the night, off shift, with no work-related reason to be there. He didn't live there either, by the way. When they approached him, he said that he had just heard about Mia's disappearance from a coworker named Tatiana Shanks, and that he came because he was concerned about her. Mia's mom started yelling at Armando across the parking lot, demanding him to tell her where her daughter was. She had seen his text messages to Mia, and she knew about his obsession over her. She knew in her bones what had happened, even without the proof. Again, I know I say this all the time, but moms always know. That whole encounter was captured on video, and Mia's family released it publicly later on, and if I can find a clip of it, I will show it to you. In the video, Armando was seen speaking with an Orange County deputy in the parking lot while members of Mia's family were trying to confront him. Want to know what Armando said in response to Emma's statement about his obsession? He said, "It's not only from my side, so don't try to make it like I'm this stalker." He said he had nothing to do with this, and he was only there out of concern for Mia. He kept his composure, and he was not arrested. The family had also reported to the deputy present that as Armando was getting out of his car, they noticed a key fob had fallen from his lap. They also believed that they saw Mia's blanket in the back of his car. They saw other items like screwdrivers in his back seat and a backpack that could be concerning too. The deputy noted these observations but did not conduct a search of his vehicle because they didn't have a warrant and they couldn't obtain it quickly enough, and Armando was not being detained either. The deputy eventually cleared him and let him leave, and when you see what happens next, you'll understand how pivotal this moment really could have been in this case. Later that afternoon, the Orange County Sheriff's Office was beginning to look more seriously at the evidence. Deputy Samir Polino returned to Arden Villas for his third visit, but this time family members were present and insisting that they looked at the things that they had clearly overlooked before. That evening, so still on September 25th, 4 members of Mia's family drove to Armando's Winter Park apartment at 35 San Jose Circle to watch him. They saw him in the parking lot removing items from the backseat of his car. He was wearing blue rubber medical gloves, while he was carrying a dark-colored backpack and what appeared to be a colorful pink blanket. Mia's family believed that they were watching him destroy or possibly conceal evidence, so they called 911 at about 8:45 that night because of what they saw happening. Castleberry Police Department officer Chad Shepard arrived just before 9 and met with Mia's family, Armando, his roommate Kenny Rodriguez Torres, and another friend that was there at the apartment that night. The officer explained that he was limited in what he could do because this was an Orange County Sheriff's Office case, not in Castleberry's jurisdiction. He couldn't force Armando to allow a search of his apartment, and he also couldn't arrest him. A family member asked Armando directly, "Will you let us search your apartment just to make sure Mia's not inside?" Armando shockingly said yes. A walkthrough was conducted with the officer, and no one found anything suspicious, so they left. The police were now moving pretty quickly because on that same day, Orange County Sheriff's Office obtained an arrest warrant for Armando for burglary to a residence. The key fob access log had been reviewed, and you will be shocked at what they found. There was irrefutable evidence that his master fob had entered Mia's apartment before she came home from work that day, the very day that she went missing. He had committed at least a burglary at minimum and possibly more, so they issued a warrant. On September 26th, Orange County Sheriff's Office conducted a thorough search of Armando's Winter Park apartment, but they didn't find Miya or him there. Elsewhere in Orlando, helicopters were flying over wooded areas behind and near the Arden Villas complex throughout that whole afternoon. The search was expanding, and a prayer vigil was held that Sunday evening as Mia's family and community gathered to pray for her safe return. Mia's disappearance was gaining national attention at this point. Social media was spreading the word, and flyers were being distributed everywhere. Everybody was looking for her. At 10:23 that morning, though, on Monday, September 27, 2021, maintenance workers at the Sabal Club Apartments in Seminole County made a discovery that would change the entire course of the investigation. Armando had previously lived and worked there, and he had been in trouble there before too. He was rejected by a female tenant while he worked there, and he was so angry by her rejection that he threw a dumbbell through her window. This was on his record, by the way, when he got the new job where Miya was living and working. The maintenance crew arrived on the morning of the 27th to access a garage that was usually used for paint storage. This was typically left unlocked, but that morning it was locked. According to the incident report documented by Seminole County Sheriff's Office deputies, the maintenance employees said that the last time their staff had entered that garage was on Friday night, so the evening of September 24th, the same day that Miya disappeared. Armando had entered that garage at some point after the evening of September 24th, but before the morning of September 27th. When they got that door open, they found Armando there dead. He was discovered hanging and had been dead for quite some time. Seminole County deputies responded to the 911 call, and Orange County Sheriff's Office was notified immediately. The arrest warrant that they had obtained only 36 hours earlier now meant nothing. There would be no interrogation, trial, or cross-examination. He took his own life, and with it, took every specific detail of what happened to Miya to the grave with him. He chose to deprive Mia's family of the answers that they deserved, including where she was. The search effort at this point escalated into a massive multi-agency operation because they knew if Armando had guilt to the point of taking his own life, Miya was likely already gone. About 175 people, including 60 detectives from the Orange County Sheriff's Office, conducted about 30 searches across 3 counties using K-9 units, helicopters, dive teams, and ATVs on ground. The FBI came in and helped with their advanced technology too, including digital forensics and cell phone tracking. The investigators focused heavily on locations that were tied to Armando, including Arden Villas, Longwood, and areas in Volusia County where they were finding absolutely nothing. The FBI found cell phone data placing Armando near an area called Timber Scan on the Lake Apartments, which is a location that he knew well, but the initial searches there came back with nothing. Just when they felt that all hope was lost, though, in the late morning of Saturday, October 2nd, 2021, 8 days after Miya Marcano was last seen alive, OCSO's emergency response team discovered a body in the heavily wooded area behind the Timber Scan on the Lake apartment complex next to the lake. Sheriff John Mena held a press conference, and he announced the devastating discovery. He said that they were certain of the identity, but the formal identification had to come from the medical examiner. He did not share the condition of the remains or any specifics about how she was found at that time. Word spread to Mia's family and to her community, who had been holding their breath ever since September 24th. The grief was overwhelming to say the least. A vigil was held that same Saturday evening as hundreds gathered at Arden Villas and locations all across South Florida, including Pembroke Pines and Miami. On Tuesday, October 5th, 2021, the chief medical examiner, Dr. Joshua D. Stephanie, confirmed what everybody already knew. The body recovered was officially identified as Miya Marcano at only 19 years old. They found her. Now, before we go into the investigation, I want to pause here to go over the autopsy findings. As you know, the autopsies of every case we talk about is going to be critical, but in cases like Mia's, where the perpetrator can't provide any answers, it becomes even more important to advocate for justice for Miya by learning about what happened to her. The autopsy was performed by Dr. Joshua D. Stephanie on October 3rd, 2021, one day after she was found. The ME documented that her body was nearly completely skeletonized in advanced decomposition. Florida weather in late September is still pretty warm because they have that subtropical heat and humidity that dramatically accelerates decomposition. The wooded area that she was found in had both heat and moisture, which is a combination that drives the decomposition process aggressively. Miya had been in that environment for about 8 days before she was found. That's why she had skeletization of the face, neck, torso, and upper arms. So all the ME had to work with for answers was primarily bone, very little soft tissue, and whatever items were recovered with her body. Mia's skeletal system had no trauma, so there were no fractures consistent with blunt force trauma in the bones. This does not mean that she was never hit or struck, because a more superficial injury can cause soft tissue injuries like bruising. But with her soft tissue gone, there wouldn't be a way to rule it out or include it, but the doctor could determine that she was not struck with enough force to break any of her bones. The ME still had to figure out what the cause of death was, and he did find duct tape around her neck, which was a critical piece of evidence. Dr. Stephanie wrote that the duct tape found on Mia's neck could have originally been positioned covering her nose and mouth area, and that exposure to the elements and decomposition may have caused it to somewhat shift down or migrate to the neck area over time. Strangulation or asphyxiation may have still happened within the soft tissues to the neck, but again, the soft tissues were no longer there for them to see the signs to support that, but the bones in the neck were not broken. There were also no sharp force injuries present to the bones or remaining soft tissue to the body, so stabbing couldn't be confirmed or ruled out either. Mia's toxicology report was completely negative as well, so nothing abnormal was in her system at the time of her death. There was also black duct tape found binding both of her wrists together behind her back and black duct tape binding both of her ankles together. This would have completely immobilized her, which makes me absolutely sick to my stomach to think about. She was entirely dependent on the man who had a sick obsession with her to move around, and I cannot imagine how terrified she was in her final moments of him. Despite the way her remains were found, the ME found no evidence to support that she had been taken advantage of. Dr. Stephanie's findings concluded by saying the manner of death was, of course, homicide, but by undetermined means. He explained his reasoning for the homicide based on 3 points. First, the restraints themselves, because they were applied at the wrists, ankles, and neck. The duct tape in these locations were physically incompatible with any natural or accidental death scenario. No one binds their wrists behind their back with duct tape. The restraints are evidence, in and of themselves, of another person's deliberate actions to harm her. Miya was found in what the report described as an abandoned section of the apartment complex, which was intentional disposal according to the ME. There was no innocent explanation as to how she ended up there. The third point that he made was the totality of circumstances from law enforcement, like the context of her disappearance, the identified suspect, and the restraints at her wrists and ankles, all confirmed that she could not have done this to herself. This was homicide. When the autopsy report was released in December 2021, the Marcano family's attorney, Daryl Washington, said that the family was so heartbroken and disturbed, specifically about the duct tape and the specifics of how Miya was found. Her family felt like the report only led them to more questions than answers, though. The state of Mia's remains and the fact that Armando was gone without any kind of note admitting to what he did meant that they were never going to get the answers that they desperately needed. All right, now that we know about the autopsy findings, I want to go through the reconstructed timeline based on what the investigation discovered. The key fob log confirmed that Armando entered Mia's apartment using the master fob at 2:14 p.m. that Friday, so over 2.5 hours before she got off of work. He had been inside her apartment before and he knew the layout, but his entry at 2:14 on September 24th had nothing to do with maintenance. He was only there to wait for her and he waited for nearly 3 hours. At 4:34, so about 26 minutes before Mia's shift ended, the fob log recorded her door opening again by the maintenance master fob. At 5:06 p.m., Mia's personal fob activated her door, so that's when she got home. This is when Armando attacked her and a struggle began. The physical evidence supported that she had been attacked based on what they found in multiple areas of her apartment. Her bed was disturbed in a way that was consistent with a violent physical altercation. And remember, jewelry was found broken and scattered all across the floor of her bedroom. Jewelry doesn't just fall off in multiple pieces and scatter across the floor. It's the kind of pattern seen when someone is grabbed and when a person's body is being controlled by someone else. Blood was also found on a pillow in her bedroom, and it was found on a pillow in the living room, too. The presence of blood in two separate areas of the apartment confirmed that violence was not confined to a single area of her home. Either Miya was moving through the apartment during the struggle, maybe to get away from him, or her body was moved. Either way, she was fighting for her life and she was not taken without putting up a fight. Blood being found on two pillows made me wonder if he tried to smother her more than once, which could explain the absence of any broken bones, but let me know if that crossed your mind too. At some point during or after the attack, we know that Armando bound her. He used the black duct tape, which turned out to be the very same type of heavy-duty black maintenance duct tape that was used by staff at Arden Villas. He taped her wrists behind her back, her ankles, and then taped over her head area, likely over her nose and mouth. Investigators found that same black duct tape hidden under the passenger seat of his car, and on that tape, they found hair. That hair was DNA matched perfectly to Miya. At 5:52, so just 46 minutes after her fob activated the door, Armando's car left the Arden Villas parking area. Mia's body is believed to have been in his vehicle, either already gone or dying when he put her in that car. What happened between 5:52 and 7:38 that night told investigators that Armando was making a deliberate attempt to create a false record suggesting that Miya was still alive. At 7:01 p.m., Armando placed a fake maintenance call. A maintenance worker calling in during off hours can be normal if they're on call, but it created a timestamp linking him to legitimate activity. At 7:11, he contacted the apartment office and asked to be let in through the complex gate to create another timestamp, but we know now that this was just to create an alibi. Then, at 7:16, the log showed Mia's personal key fob unlocking her door. The fob was swiped, but the door was never opened. Armando was attempting to create a trail or some type of evidence to make it seem like Miya was still alive around that time by taking her key fob and swiping it at her own door. And remember, Mia's family saw him drop that key fob too. Surveillance footage around this time shows Armando driving a golf cart in the area near Mia's apartment and the leasing office. His movements on that golf cart correlated with the timing of the fob activating at her door too. This whole plan was purely premeditation. This is someone who killed a young woman and then spent more than an hour and a half creating false evidence to make it seem like she was still alive. He was not someone who just snapped. He planned out everything. Then, at 7:38 that night, Armando's car left the Arden Villas area. License plate readers, cell phone records, and GPS data all confirmed his route. He drove approximately 18 miles west across Orlando to the Timber Scan on the Lake Apartments. His phone placed him there between 8:20 to 8:40 p.m. He was on that property for just 20 minutes, which was just long enough to do what he came there to do. He carried Miya into the heavily wooded area behind the abandoned section of that apartment complex near the lake. He put her down in the undergrowth, and then he just left her there. Her red purse and wallet were found with her, and she was still wearing the blue jeans that she'd had on at work that morning. She was also wearing a necklace with her name on it, and her maroon shirt was still on too. Cell phone records showed that he returned to the Arden Villas area sometime that evening, which was before the family confronted him. Additional DNA evidence linking Armando to the crime outside of Mia's hair and the duct tape in his car was his DNA was found on her clothing. Between the DNA and the key fob log, it was clear that Armando had done this. Mia's family didn't need a trial for sure to know that this monster is the one that did this to their loved one. I'm sure that you saw this coming from early on, but we can't close out today's video without addressing the failures in the initial investigation. The final OCSO report, combined with the family's lawsuit, revealed a pattern of missed and dismissed evidence in the first 24 to 36 hours that, had it been handled differently, might have changed the outcome of this case. A clear example of this is the fingerprint evidence that was collected by that security guard at Arden Villas named Jacoby Coleman. Now, remember, he had lifted those fingerprints from outside of Mia's bedroom window right after her disappearance. He physically had them on tape and preserved. When Deputy Polino returned to the complex on September 25th, Coleman tried to hand that evidence over to him, and Polino declined to take the fingerprints, then laughed in the security guard's face and said, "Keep them in case we need them." And then he followed up by saying this wasn't a high priority case, just to jog your memory. I can't help but wonder if maybe he was just trying to make the security guard feel small, or if he felt he knew better, but let me know what you think in the comments about that. The Orange County Sheriff's Office own internal affairs review later found that Polino had demonstrated a lack of urgency. He was found to have an unsatisfactory performance, and he received a 150-hour unpaid suspension as his discipline, and his supervisor, Corporal Kenneth Dale, received a 10-hour unpaid suspension. That is only one shift for the supervisor and 15 shifts for Polino, by the way. The reason his supervisor was also in trouble was because he was informed of the case throughout Polino's shifts, and he failed to accurately relay to others the critical information about the signs of struggle that were found in the apartment, including the confrontation between the family and Armando and the broken window locks. These were huge misses, especially from an experienced supervisor. Had they intervened and done what they needed to do with Armando on scene, they may have been able to arrest him before he stole his own life, and then that family could have been granted the justice they deserved. Both officers remain employed by the Orange County Sheriff's Office after their suspensions. The internal review also found that Polino had failed to document the blood on the bedroom pillow in his report too. He failed to document the furniture barricading the bedroom door, and he failed to report his observations about the window locks to his supervisor. Because of all of this, Miya was treated as a voluntary missing person instead of a missing endangered person for all those critical hours after she disappeared, and this affected the level of resources that they would use to find her. These were monumental mistakes by that police department. The family's attorney made it clear that had someone competent and urgent been at the apartment in those first few hours after Miya disappeared, the key fob logs would have been searched and pulled immediately, Armando would have been identified immediately, and he would have been detained before he had an opportunity to take his life. Whether Miya would have been found alive at that point or not is a question that nobody can answer. But she might have been found much sooner than she was, with much more tissue present, which would have allowed the ME to provide the family with more answers. And her family deserved the chance at those answers that Armando denied them to. In case you forgot from earlier, Mia's favorite color was royal blue, and this was honored by her family at her funeral, painting her a casket that exact shade and placing a crown on the latch to match her nickname, Princess. She is still deeply missed by her family, and they work hard to honor her memory by advocating for justice and change. Mia's family pursued civil lawsuits, and they sued Arden Villas and the Price Company for negligence, saying that there were clear failures in background checks, tenant safety, and key access control, but the case was settled outside of court. A second lawsuit targeted law enforcement, claiming early investigative failures, particularly by the responding deputies. Mia's case also led to the creation of Mia's Law, which was signed by Ron DeSantis in 2024, and it introduced stricter apartment safety measures, including mandatory employee background checks, tighter control and tracking of master keys, and longer notice requirements before unit entry. Her family also created the Miya Marcano Foundation, which focuses on preventing violence against women, improving apartment safety standards, and supporting families of missing persons. Mia's mom spoke about losing her baby girl, and she said, "What happened to Miya was one of the worst tragedies ever, and with this program, I somehow find peace or comfort knowing that we'll be able to save another family, another person from what we are going through." Her family also received a key to the city of Pembroke Pines, and communities across the Caribbean, from Trinidad to the British Virgin Islands to Miami, all honored Miya. Thank you so much for spending time with me today and for listening to Mia's story. This case was incredibly frustrating because, just like so many others we talk about, there were countless opportunities for this to have turned out differently. I'm sending Mia and her loved ones all my love, and I hope that you've all had a wonderful week. And please be extra kind to yourselves this upcoming week, nurse's orders. If you made it this far into today's video, don't forget to drop a butterfly in the chat. I'll see you next time. Bye.